Tyrion Lannister sat in his narrow cell beneath the Red Keep, the torchlight on the walls flickering as though in sympathy with the royal of conflicting emotions within him. He had been there for days now, enough time for his anger to simmer down into a colder, more focused rage. Enough time, too, for his keen mind to piece together a desperate plan. He understood perfectly that the trial that awaited him was nothing more than a cunning trap. A farce orchestrated by his sister, Cersei, and enabled by the father who had never once shown him an ounce of paternal warmth. Tyrion had read between the lines. He knew how this would end if he did not intervene. But more than that, he had heard whispers of what might happen to Shae if she remained in King's Landing. If she were used as a witness against him, or worse, thrown to the lions because of her association with him, Tyrion would never forgive himself. That grim possibility haunted his every waking moment. The cell's meager bed offered no solace. He ate little, slept less, but his mind raced even when his body was exhausted. After his brother Jaime had visited him in secret, promising he would try to find a way to free him, Tyrion's mind had settled on something else. There was only one person in the Seven Kingdoms who held all the strings, who had the power to bend any trial to his will, Lord Tywin Lannister, Tyrion's own father. Tyrion had tried to please him his entire life, and the only tokens of acknowledgement he'd ever received from Tywin were scorn and contempt. Now Tywin intended to use every ounce of that formidable power to ensure Tyrion's ruin. Tyrion had no illusions about his situation. The judges would be men loyal to the hand of the king, or terrified of the Queen Regent's wrath, or both. Even if Tyrion could present incontrovertible evidence of his innocence in Joffrey's murder, Tywin would crush any semblance of justice underfoot. Such was the patriarchy of House Lannister, an immovable edifice built in Tywin's image. And so Tyrion contemplated the unthinkable, an act so audacious that it might tilt the balance in his favor and save the only woman who had shown him genuine affection in this viper's nest of a city. He had no illusions about the monstrous nature of the plan forming in his mind. Poisoning his own father, he tried not to think of the moral ramifications because the necessity of his plight outweighed them in his mind. Tywin would never stop until Tyrion was dead. Shae, being his weakness, would not be spared, her name would be tarnished, she would be humiliated or murdered, or worse. The city had ways of devouring those who found themselves on the wrong side of power. Tyrion knew what Tywin's wrath looked like, and he refused to let Shae face it. One evening, as the bells of the city chimed far above, echoing through the corridors of stone and memory, Tyrion lay on his bed, plotting every detail. The first and most important step was securing the poison. King's Landing teemed with enough cutthroats and black market traders that one could purchase anything from exotic wines to lethal potions brewed in the far corners of Essos. Yet Tyrion's immediate predicament was that he was imprisoned under guard, and his captivity greatly limited his ability to move pieces on the board. He needed someone who could act on his behalf, and he quickly settled on the one name who might risk everything for him, Varys, the Master of Whisperers. Summoning Varys was no simple matter, but if the spider was curious enough, and Tyrion knew he would appear. True to form, Varys materialized outside the cell late one night, stepping forward from the shadows as if he had always been there. He wore soft slippers that made no sound on the cold stone floor. His hands folded gracefully in front of him, his plump face affable, though his dark eyes glittered with caution as he studied Tyrion. "My lord," Varys said softly, voice echoing like a whisper woven with silk. "You summoned me. To what do I owe this pleasure?" Tyrion pushed himself upright on the bed. In the flicker of the torches, the lines of exhaustion on his face were deep shadows. "We both know there's no pleasure in these cells," he replied with his characteristic cynicism. "But I do have a proposition for you." Varys's gaze remained unreadable. "I see. I trust it is something that might benefit the realm, or is it purely to save your own skin?" "You're no fool, Varys," Tyrion said. "My father is orchestrating everything. I will stand no chance at trial. You know this as well as I do. Shae's life is in danger. She is still in King's Landing, likely being watched even now. If the day of my trial arrives, my father will see to it that she is coerced, threatened, or possibly slain. I need her gone before that happens. But I also need to ensure my father can no longer pull these strings." Varys tilted his head, tapping a finger against his lips. "You speak as if there is only one way to ensure your father stops meddling." "There is," Tyrion replied, leaving no room for ambiguity. "He must die." A swirl of conflicting emotions passed over Varys's face, so fleeting that an untrained eye would have missed it. He clasped his hands behind his back. "Lord Tywin Lannister is not just your father, my lord. He is the hand of the king, the true power behind the Iron Throne. To do away with him, the realm will quake." Tyrion let out a sardonic bark of laughter. The realm quakes enough as it is. The War of the Five Kings, the Tyrell intrigue, the Martell's thirst for vengeance, it's already in chaos. One more quake won't bring the roof down, but it might buy me time and a chance for Shae to live. Varys regarded him for a long moment. Then he gave a small nod. You are adamant. I'm out of options. And you will want me to supply the means? Only the means to gain the means, Tyrion said. I need access to the right people. Someone who can deliver a poison, someone who can help me slip it to my father. You thrive on secrets, and you always claim to serve the realm. Help me, and you may find this realm better off without Tywin's brand of tyranny. Or perhaps replaced with yours? Varys suggested gently. Tyrion's face hardened. I only want my life and Shae's. I want an end to this farce before innocent blood is spilled. Innocent blood is always spilled, Varys murmured. He hesitated, then gave the faintest inclination of his head. Very well, I will do what I can. But be warned, I take great risks in doing so. If all goes wrong, you will fade into the shadows, as you always do. I wouldn't expect less, Tyrion said. Varys only offered the faint ghost of a smile before gliding away, his robes scraping softly on the floor. Tyrion watched the empty corridor long after Varys was gone, replaying the conversation in his mind. He had lit a fuse this night, and there would be no snuffing it out until it reached the explosive end. Days passed. Tyrion's daily routine did not change outwardly. He was still fed scraps, still allowed to leave his cell on occasion with his guards, but only so far as an anteroom where he might bathe or meet with his chosen representatives. Jaime came once more, concerned but powerless to do anything truly beneficial. Tyrion's trial in the throne room was looming. Shae's name was whispered around every corner. Late on the eve before his trial was set to begin, Varys reappeared. The spider slipped into Tyrion's cell so silently that Tyrion, half dozing, failed to notice until the man's voice spoke in his ear. Varys placed a small leather pouch beside Tyrion. In here, he said softly, you will find what you require. Suffice it to say, it comes from Essos, from a region whose poisons are infamous. A single pinch, dissolved in wine or water, will kill an adult man within an hour without leaving easily discernible traces. Be cautious in how you administer it. Questions may be asked. Tyrion's heart pounded as he reached for the pouch. It felt heavier than expected, as if it contained not just a deadly substance, but the combined weight of his fear and desperation. And do we have a plan? He asked. Varys sighed. This is where your cunning must do the work. I can arrange for Shae to be secreted out of King's Landing within the next day, perhaps two, if you can find a pretext for delaying the trial. But to ensure that pretext, you will need to affect your father's health before that day. In short, my lord, if you truly mean to poison him, do so swiftly. Tyrion's voice was steady, though his breath caught in his throat. I will. But if Shae goes missing before the trial, that alone might incite suspicion. Varys nodded. I will arrange a diversion, something to keep their eyes off her departure. You need only create a small window of time so I can smuggle her out. Once she is safe, you may do as you will. If Tywin realizes she's gone, well, that will be the least of his worries. A dark humor took Tyrion, and he almost wanted to laugh. Yes, he'll have more pressing concerns, won't he? Varys pursed his lips, considering Tyrion for a moment. I do not relish this path you walk, my lord, but it seems there is no turning back. Tyrion glanced at the pouch again. There isn't. Varys's expression was a medley of pity and acceptance as he disappeared into the corridor, leaving Tyrion alone in his cell, the weight of his impending crime like a boulder on his chest. That night, sleep eluded him. He lay awake, counting the flickers of the torch until morning, when he would be escorted under guard into the throne room for the preliminary hearing of his trial. When the morning came, the guards arrived to rouse Tyrion from what little rest he'd managed. He was marched through winding corridors into the throne room, a place he had once stood proudly as Hand of the King, awarding justice and forging alliances. Now he was a prisoner in shackles, his clothes dusty, his hair disheveled, his eyes rimmed red with sleepless nights. The hall was already filling with courtiers, lords, and ladies hungry for spectacle. Grand Maester Pycelle stood near the dais, clutching at his chain of office, whispering in Cersei's ear, while Prince Oberyn Martell and Mace Tyrell sat together in a corner, each wearing a face of guarded curiosity. And there, perched on the Iron Throne itself, sat Tommen, the Boy King, wide-eyed and ill at ease as he prepared to preside over the trial. But Tyrion's attention snapped to the man standing near the foot of the throne. Tywin Lannister, dressed in regal black and gold, a lion's head clasp at his collar. His stern face was unreadable, all angles and cold lines. Tyrion could practically feel the aura of intimidation radiating off him. The accusations were read out. Tyrion stood, jaws clenched, occasionally retorting with pointed remarks that made some in the audience titter nervously. Tywin, holding the pages of the charges, looked not at Tyrion but through him. The message was clear. You are nothing, you are done. My word is law. The hearing was a formality, a veneer of justice. Tyrion was indicted again, told that the formal trial would commence the next day. Shae was mentioned, her testimony pending, the final nail in Tyrion's coffin. At that, Tyrion searched the crowd for a glimpse of her, but she was absent, likely already under watch, perhaps rehearsing whatever damning testimony Tywin and Cersei had forced upon her. Tyrion's heart twisted at the thought. It was then he noticed Varys standing at the periphery, giving him a minute nod. All was in place. The hearing ended, and Tyrion was led back to his cell. He had one day, maybe less, to enact his plan. He told the guards he needed to meet with his champion, that he intended to call for a trial by combat. This request, when relayed to Tywin and Cersei, was not entirely unexpected. After all, Tyrion had employed such methods before. It was not granted immediately, but Tyrion counted on the Lannisters' arrogance. They would let him wriggle a little because they did not fear a trial by combat any more than they feared any other scheme. They believed Tyrion was doomed to fail, champion or not. Afternoon turned to dusk and Tyrion waited. At last, an undergaoler brought him word. Tywin would visit him that night to hear out his argument for a trial by combat. A private meeting, father and son, in Tyrion's cell. An auspicious scenario if Tyrion was cunning enough to take advantage of it. He clutched the leather pouch inside his tunic, heart hammering with each second that passed. He knew how carefully he must choose the moment. Poison was best administered through food or drink. Wine was the obvious vessel. He recalled every detail of how Tywin liked his wine. He made sure to keep an unassuming goblet and a small jug of Arbor Red near the bed in his cell, courtesy of the few privileges Tyrion was still accorded by virtue of his name, though the wine was usually tested or monitored. But with Tywin coming personally, there might be a chance to share a private conversation and a bottle. That was how Tyrion set the trap. It was deep into the hour of the owl when Tywin Lannister arrived, accompanied by 2 guards. Tywin halted them at the door of the cell. "Remain outside," he commanded. "I will speak to my son alone." They hesitated but bowed. They kept their post, though Tywin closing the iron door behind him was as good as any privacy Tyrion could hope for in that dank place. Tywin turned, his posture erect, hands clasped behind his back. The lines of his face seemed chiseled from stone. "You summoned me," Tywin said simply. Tyrion gave a mocking half-smile. "I suppose I did, though I hardly thought you'd come. You've never been particularly thrilled to be in my company." Tywin surveyed the meager cell, taking in the cot, the stained walls, the single flickering torch in the sconce. He wore a faint expression of distaste. "I'm here to put an end to this foolishness once and for all. Your trial commences tomorrow. If you have reason to spare yourself, speak it now." Tyrion fingered the cork on the wine jug. "Then allow me to speak. Would you care for some wine?" He forced a casual note into his voice as if this were all mere courtesy. Tywin's eyes flicked to the jug, then back to Tyrion's face. "I do not drink the swill they serve prisoners." Tyrion pulled a wry smile. "I still have a small stash of Arbor Red that is decent enough. But as you wish." He poured himself some to keep up the act, raising the goblet as if to take a sip. The moment Tywin's gaze flickered to the side, Tyrion hesitated, recalling the dose Varys had given him. A single pinch, that was all it took. He had practiced the motion in his mind. Now was the time to show his father he was harmless, unsuspecting. Slowly, carefully, Tyrion made it appear that he was tipping the small pouch, actually letting just enough of the powder drift into the jug, not the cup. But the old lion was as sharp as ever. Tywin's gaze snapped back. "What are you doing, Tyrion?" Holding his breath, Tyrion casually lowered his cup. Merely enjoying a drink, father. Are we not to have a civilized conversation? Tywin's eyes narrowed. A conversation, yes. But I will not drink your contraband. Speak. Tyrion's heart thundered. The poison was in the jug now, presumably dissolving. All Tywin had to do was take a single cup. If Tywin refused, Tyrion's entire plan might fall apart. He took a slow sip from his own cup, deliberately from the portion that had not been poisoned. It was a risk. As you wish, Tyrion said after he swallowed. I wanted to discuss Shae. Tomorrow, she will be brought in to testify. The woman is nothing more than a frightened girl, father. She has no illusions of grandeur. She poses no threat to you or House Lannister. I will decide who is a threat to House Lannister, Tywin replied coldly. She will say exactly what is required of her, and then I shall rid King's Landing of that piece of refuse. A whore has no place in your defense or anywhere near the city. Tyrion felt the old anger flare within him. You'd kill her because she once served me? No, Tywin said, his tone measured. I would kill her because she has become a liability to House Lannister. You, Tyrion, are the one who made her a liability by bringing her here in the first place. You always let your base appetites endanger our family. Cold dread seeped into Tyrion's stomach. But you'll give me a fair trial, father? You'll let me speak in my own defense. Tywin stared down at him, lips pressed thin. You will have the formality of it, yes. But you are not walking out of this a free man. I will see you sent to the wall if the king shows mercy or condemned to death if he does not. Cersei thirsts for your head. If I hadn't intervened, she would have arranged it already. Tyrion, feeling the bile rise in his throat, forced himself to keep his composure. Then what are you offering me? And why bother to come here yourself? I am here because, despite your many failings, you are still a Lannister by blood. I am here to offer you a dignified end to this. Confess your crime, real or not. Confess to Joffrey's murder, and I will send you to the wall. A lifetime in black, but you live. Refuse, and Cersei will push for a public execution. I will do nothing to stop her. And Shae? Tywin shrugged, the movement crisp, dismissive. She'll be made an example. But her life may be spared if you comply. A swirl of hatred rose in Tyrion, so strong that his vision reddened at the edges. You ask me to condemn myself, relinquish my name and my birthright, and in return you might spare Shae? A whore's life in exchange for yours, consider it a mercy, Tywin said, voice remote. Tyrion stared at the jug of wine. He drained the remainder of the cup he had poured himself. Carefully, he refilled it with the contents of the jug, swirling the liquid. The poison was presumably now mixed evenly. He stared at the swirl of red in the torchlight. A wave of desperation flooded him. Tywin had refused wine before, but perhaps Tyrion could goad him into it now if he played the right chord. Do you remember, Tyrion said slowly, the first time I drank wine in your presence? I was just a boy of 6 or 7, and you caught me swiping a flagon from the feast. You told me wine was for Lannisters, not for dwarfs. And I told you I was a Lannister by blood. You had me whipped. Tywin gave him a stern look. I fail to see the point of this trip down memory lane. Tyrion feigned a casual shrug. It seems I cannot even enjoy the only small comfort in my life, wine, without you judging me. And now you show up in my cell, commanding me to bend or break. With a theatrical gesture, he pulled a second cup from beneath his cot. He placed it beside the jug. If you truly mean to treat me like a son, if you expect me to listen, then share a cup with me. Show me that this fatherly act of yours is not just another ruse to look powerful in front of the realm. He prayed his father's pride would take the bait. For a moment, Tywin's eyes blazed with indignation at Tyrion's effrontery. Then something shifted. Tywin's face set in grim lines, and he stepped forward. You believe a single cup of wine will prove anything? Very well. In a move that almost made Tyrion's heart stop, Tywin reached for the jug, took the cup Tyrion had set out, and poured the wine himself. Tyrion tried not to stare too eagerly. It seemed Tywin was in no mood for pleasantries or subtlety. He regarded the wine suspiciously for a moment, but then lifted it to his lips. A small sip. Another. The rest of the cup went untasted, but it might still be enough. The relief that flooded Tyrion's veins was dizzying, almost overwhelming. Tywin set the half-finished cup on Tyrion's rickety table. You have your wine. Now you will listen. I will return in the morning to hear your confession. Should you fail to deliver, I will not spare that whore's life. The choice is yours, Tyrion. Tywin turned and rapped on the cell door. The guards outside swung it open. With a swirl of his black and gold cloak, Tywin strode out. The clang of the door reverberated through the cell, the torchlight flickering ominously. Tyrion sat on his bed, breathing hard, staring at the cup that bore the faint traces of Tywin's lips. He felt no victory yet, only nauseous fear at what he had just done. He had crossed a line. He had spilled Lannister blood. But for Shae, he would do it again. That night, Tyrion could not sleep. Every clank of metal in the corridor, every distant footstep made him imagine Tywin's surging form, full of rage at realizing what had been done to him. Then dawn's pale glow seeped into the corridors. And no one came for Tyrion. No one came with news. Hour after hour, Tyrion waited until he realized that the poison would be working its dark magic in Tywin's body. If the dose had been administered correctly, Tywin would be weakening. Perhaps in enough pain to send for Pycelle, or for Kevan Lannister, or for help from the Red Keep's masters-at-arms. Then, at mid-morning, the expected commotion began outside. Tyrion heard frantic voices, boots pounding on stone. He could not decipher the words, but the tone was urgent, panicked. Then a jailer appeared at Tyrion's cell, flanked by 3 gold cloaks, who hastily unlocked it. "Come with us," the guard barked. Now. They seized Tyrion by the arms none too gently and hustled him out into the corridor. Tyrion's heart hammered, though he kept his face impassive. If Tywin had died already, this would be the moment Tyrion was dragged to immediate sentencing by a vengeful Cersei. But if Tywin was only ill, perhaps Tyrion could angle for time enough for Varys to get Shae away. They led him, not to the throne room, but to Tywin's private chambers. The richly appointed hall felt stifling. When Tyrion stumbled into the main room, he saw Grand Maester Pycelle huddled over the bed, rummaging through vials, and Kevan Lannister standing grim-faced off to one side. Jaime was there too, a thunderous expression on his face. And in the bed, propped up by pillows, was Tywin, looking pale as death. His eyes flickered to Tyrion. Tyrion saw recognition in them, a terrifying spark of comprehension. Tywin tried to speak, but his throat worked soundlessly. Pycelle turned at Tyrion's arrival, trembling with a mixture of fear and old age. He's come down with something unknown. Gods be good, I cannot find a cause. Kevan glared at Tyrion. What do you know of this? My brother was well last night. Now he is near death. Tyrion forced a neutral expression. You drag me out of my cell and ask me what I know of my father's illness? I'm no maester. I have spent the entire night locked away. Jaime rushed forward, grabbing Tyrion by the collar of his tunic. Don't lie to me. You threatened to kill father if he condemned you. Did you do this? Tyrion thought fast. Are you out of your mind? How would I have poisoned him from my cell, with half the Red Keep guarding his life? Jaime stared at him, searching his face. Tyrion returned the gaze unflinchingly, though inside he felt a quake of guilt and fear. Jaime knew him well, but Jaime also knew that Tyrion was no fool. Could Tyrion have found a way? Yes, obviously, but proving it was another matter entirely. Tywin made a rasping sound from the bed, as if trying to speak. Pycelle hurriedly pressed a small glass phial to his lips, forcing him to swallow. Tywin's face contorted in pain. A trickle of blackish bile seeped from the corner of his mouth. The stench that followed made Kevan recoil. Pycelle, voice wobbling, addressed Kevan and Jaime. He shows signs of severe intestinal distress, possibly a poison, but none I recognize. I've tried every remedy I know. Milk of the poppy to ease his pain, purgatives to rid him of toxins. Nothing is working. The gods help us. He is slipping away. Jaime looked like he wanted to tear something apart. Kevan turned back to Tyrion, eyes blazing. If he dies, dwarf, I swear. You swear you'll do what, uncle? Tyrion cut in, adopting a sneer, his old defensive posture. Behead me? That was already the plan, wasn't it? You think I can conjure poisons from thin air? I've been locked in a cell. Feel free to search me, search my cell. You won't find any poison. He spread his hands theatrically. Kevan, momentarily at a loss, glowered in frustration, stepping away. The tension in the room was thick as tar. Outside, Tyrion could hear the bustle of the Red Keep as word began to spread. Tywin Lannister, the great lord of Casterly Rock, the hand of the king, lay dying. A silence descended as each of them wrestled with what that might mean for the realm, and for the Lannisters themselves. Cersei arrived then, sweeping in like a fury of flame, her golden hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes wild. "Father!" she cried, hurrying to the bedside. When she saw Tyrion, she practically spat in rage. What is he doing here? Kevan explained that they had dragged Tyrion here for answers. Cersei rounded on Tyrion. You murderer! You vile, twisted little creature! You have killed our father. Tyrion, forcing a calm he did not feel, answered, "He's not dead yet. Guards!" she shrieked. "Seize him, bind him hand and foot. Let him watch father die. Then we shall execute him." No one in the room dared to defy her. The guards rushed forward, manhandling Tyrion to the stone floor, slapping iron shackles around his wrists and ankles. As they forced him into a corner, Tyrion's mind whirled. He had expected suspicion, but he had hoped the suddenness of Tywin's decline might cloud the truth. Still, they had no proof. The only question was how quickly Tywin would die and if that gave Varys enough time to spirit Shae away. Tyrion risked a glance out the wide window. The morning sun was rising high, bathing the city in a warm glow. If Varys did as he promised, Shae might already be en route to a waiting ship or stowed away in one of the Spider's hideouts. The thought steadied Tyrion. He took a small comfort in knowing that he had done this for her, that if nothing else, she might yet live. Time crawled. Pycelle hovered, mixing potions and poultices, none of which seemed to help. Tywin's ragged breaths filled the silence. Jaime paced like a caged animal, torn between fury and helplessness. Cersei clutched Tywin's hand, tears in her eyes, though Tyrion suspected they were tears of fear as much as grief. Kevin tried to offer suggestions, but Pycelle could only shake his head in despair. Finally, as the bells of the city tolled midday, Tywin let out a shuddering gasp and went still. The hush that descended was absolute. Cersei sobbed, placing her head on his chest. Kevin slowly bowed his head. Jaime sank into a chair, looking gutted as though half of his world had collapsed in an instant. Tyrion, bound in chains, watched from the corner of the room, a thousand thoughts warring in his mind. He saw the final exhalation of the man who had loomed larger than life in his existence, whose scorn and disregard had shaped Tyrion's every step. A father he had tried to please, tried to outwit, and finally had to destroy. The moment was surreal. A lifetime of repressed fury and sorrow welled up in Tyrion's chest. He felt neither glee nor triumph, only a hollow sense of inevitability. For a span of heartbeats, no one moved. Then Cersei slowly lifted her face from Tywin's chest. She glared at Tyrion with a look of pure, unfiltered hatred. "Put him in the black cells," she whispered. "He will answer for this." The gold cloaks hauled Tyrion upright, dragging him away before he could speak. He caught Jaime's eye just before leaving the room. Jaime's expression was pained, conflicted. Tyrion wondered if that brief flicker of uncertainty meant Jaime believed him or doubted him. But it hardly mattered now. Tyrion was a man condemned. He had done what he came to do. They brought him deeper into the Red Keep than he had ever been, the black cells where no sunlight reached. Fewer torches, fewer visitors. This was a place where men were sent to be forgotten. The door clanged shut, and Tyrion sat in the darkness, the stench of damp and despair thick in the air. Time ceased to have meaning. Days might have passed, or perhaps only hours. He was given stale bread and water by guards who refused to answer his questions. He found himself drifting in and out of a weary state, both physically and mentally. The enormity of what he had done pressed on him like a weight. He tried to comfort himself with the thought of Shae escaping, of Varys fulfilling his promise. Then one day, he could not say how many had passed, the door to the black cell opened. Light flooded in, blinding him. He squinted, heart lurching at the sight of none other than Jaime, accompanied by a single silent gold cloak. Jaime stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "They've left me alone with you," Jaime said softly, his voice a broken whisper. "Seven, help me, I don't know what to believe, Tyrion." Tyrion blinked, adjusting to the flickering torchlight. "I think you do." Jaime studied him for a long moment, then exhaled. "Father is dead. Cersei is raging. She wants your head. Kevin is demanding a thorough investigation. Everyone in the Red Keep is on edge, wondering who might have killed Tywin Lannister. The realm is on the brink of chaos. The Tyrells are threatening to withdraw from the alliance unless stability is assured. The Martells whisper that this might be their chance to sow more unrest. And in the midst of it, no one has any proof that you were the poisoner, but everyone suspects you." Tyrion forced a hoarse laugh. "I suppose I should be flattered." Jaime's eyes bored into Tyrion's. "I need to know, brother. Did you do it?" Tyrion considered lying to Jaime's face, telling him what he'd told the others, that it was impossible that he had been locked up. But he couldn't. This was Jaime, the only family member who had ever shown him even a semblance of genuine affection. He found he couldn't speak for a moment, then forced out he was going to kill Shae. Or worse. And kill me as well. I couldn't let that happen. Jaime clenched his jaw, stepping back as if struck. 1,000 emotions warred in his eyes. "7 hells, Tyrion." He lowered his voice, glancing at the guard who had the good sense to keep his gaze averted. You've unleashed something terrible. Cersei is on the warpath. She said she will see you burn for this. And she'll do anything to root out your accomplices. She has men scouring Flea Bottom for any sign of how you got the poison. There have already been arrests. Tyrion's stomach churned. Varys was cunning enough to keep himself safe, but had Shae escaped in time? If she was still in the city, the Lannister retribution might find her. Fear formed a hard lump in Tyrion's throat. He could only pray that events had transpired quickly enough for her to slip away. Jaime raked a hand through his hair. Tyrion, I can't save you. Not this time. Not after, he sighed heavily. Cersei wants a trial, a real one, not that travesty with Joffrey's murder. She wants to expose every detail of how you poisoned our father to humiliate you before the realm. Then she wants to watch you die. Tyrion's mouth twisted into a bitter smile. At least she's consistent. Jaime shook his head. She may succeed. With father gone, there's no higher authority to overrule her. Tommen is too young and frightened to stand up to her. The small council is in shambles. Mace Tyrell is pressing for more lands, Pycelle is incompetent, and Oberyn Martell has left for Dorne. So, Tyrion said, I suppose I'm doomed. Jaime's eyes flickered with something like pity. She means to move fast. She's called for a trial in 3 days. Don't expect it to last long. Tyrion closed his eyes. 3 days. So soon. If there's no one to stop her, then I suppose I'll face what's coming. Jaime remained silent for a long beat. Then he stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. Meet her with cunning. Proclaim your innocence. Demand a trial by combat again if you must. If you have a champion, she'll pick Ser Gregor Clegane or another monster, just as she did before, Tyrion said tiredly. I can't rely on Oberyn Martell this time. No one will volunteer for me. Bronn is gone. Pod is gone. There may be some other way, Jaime said, though Tyrion could hear in his voice how hollow that sounded. They stood in silence. Jaime looked around the cell at the rough stone walls, the stale straw in the corner, the dripping water from some hidden leak. A grim acceptance seemed to settle over him. He moved to leave, but then hesitated at the door. You killed him, Jaime said softly, and yet I cannot entirely fault you. Our father was all that he was. He let out a breath. I will see what I can do, but don't hold hope. Then he was gone, and the door clanged shut. Tyrion slumped to the floor, a swirl of exhaustion threatening to consume him. He could almost hear Tywin's cold voice echoing, You are no son of mine. Tyrion let his head fall back against the damp stone. He had done this to protect Shae, and for that he would pay any price. In the 3 days that followed, Tyrion was given minimal rations and told nothing else. He spent the long hours in near darkness, his head swimming with dread. At times, he found himself cackling softly at the absurdity of it all, once again on trial for his life, once again facing a father's condemnation, but this time the father was dead at his own hand. He found no comfort in the irony. At last, dawn arrived on the day of his new trial. Guards came, roughly hauled him to his feet, and led him out of the black cells. They shaved him, tossed ill-fitting clothes at him. Then, in shackles, they paraded him up to the throne room. Crowds had gathered, courtiers, knights, lords, ladies, all anticipating the next great spectacle. Word had spread that Tyrion Lannister, the imp, had murdered his father with poison, and the city's appetite for drama was insatiable. He was marched in front of the Iron Throne. Tommen sat stiffly, looking impossibly small. Cersei stood at his side, a severe black gown emphasizing her pale face, her eyes glittering with fury and triumph. Mace Tyrell, now Hand of the King in the chaos, sat in the seat of judgment, as did a newly reinstated maester chosen by Cersei to replace Pycelle. Kevan Lannister stood nearby, his face a mix of grief and stoic determination. The hush that fell was suffocating. Cersei stepped forward, her voice loud enough to carry. Tyrion Lannister, you stand accused of the murder of Tywin Lannister, Hand of the King, through the foul use of poison. Do you deny or confess? Tyrion lifted his chin, staring at Cersei, at the throne, at the gathered masses. The words came out in a rasp. I deny it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cersei's eyes burned. We have evidence of your threats against our father, of your resentment and your cunning. We have testimony that you had means to procure poison, though from where we do not yet know. Do you continue to deny? I do, Tyrion said, forcing a calm in his tone. He saw how her anger flared, and it gave him a perverse sense of satisfaction. If you had actual proof, you wouldn't be wasting time with a trial. I recall you prefer your justice swift and final when the evidence is clear. Yet here you are, trying to smear me with rumors. Cersei gave a chilling smile. Very well. Bring forth the witnesses. One by one, various servants and guards paraded forth, each with a piece of the puzzle. They had overheard Tyrion's bitter remarks, they had seen him in conversation with suspicious characters, they recounted the night Tywin visited him in the cell. But no one had actually seen Tyrion add poison to Tywin's cup. No one had actual proof. Tyrion watched as the narrative built, though one drop at a time, fueling the crowd's conviction that Tyrion was undoubtedly guilty. Then, to Tyrion's surprise, Shae was not among them. Fear and relief mingled in him. Maybe Varys had succeeded. Maybe she was gone. He prayed for that to be true. At last, Kevan Lannister spoke, voice solemn. Tyrion, though you deny the accusations, your father is dead and suspicion weighs heavily upon you. In light of the circumstances, you are allowed one last opportunity, produce evidence of your innocence or name a champion. Otherwise, the king's justice shall be executed upon you at once. Tyrion's heart pounded. The crowd stirred restlessly. He could feel the weight of their scorn, their thirst for a grisly end. Tommen, perched on the throne, would not meet Tyrion's gaze. Slowly, Tyrion raised his manacled hands, the chains clinking. I do not have evidence, nor can I produce a champion capable of winning me my freedom this day. The memory of Oberyn's demise against the mountain haunted him. There would be no second champion volunteering to die for Tyrion Lannister. He was alone. Cersei's smile was triumphant. She looked ready to speak the death sentence. But Tyrion was not finished. He drew in a trembling breath. However, he said, his voice echoing, I do have a final statement. I want every person in this room to hear it. He turned, slowly, to take in the watchers, the sneering nobles, the fearful small folk, the row upon row of guards. He saw Sansa's old seat where once she had been forced to witness cruelty. He saw the great hall where he had tried to do some good during the Battle of Blackwater. But all he saw now was a city that had never cared for him, never welcomed him, and never shown him mercy. In a voice that resonated with all the bitterness in his heart, Tyrion spoke, I have been judged by this city before, judged wrongly for a crime I did not commit. I saved King's Landing from Stannis Baratheon, yet was repaid with betrayal. I was forced to stand trial for Joffrey's murder, though I was innocent. And now I am blamed for my father's death, though you have no real proof. If I had the power to kill my father, I might have used it long ago, but I have always been caged by his will and your hatred. He paused, letting the acid in his words seep through the silence. I will die in this city one way or another. But know this, I regret nothing but being born a Lannister in your vile court. May the gods have mercy on your souls when the day of reckoning comes. A tense hush followed. Tyrion could see the fury on Cersei's face. She stepped forward to deliver her final blow. Then you have sealed your fate. She turned to the king's guard and gave a curt nod. Take him away. His sentence is death. We shall hold the execution in the morning so all the city may bear witness. A roar of approval and shock coursed through the crowd. The gold cloak seized Tyrion. As they dragged him from the throne room, he caught Jaime's eye for the briefest moment. Jaime looked away helpless. Tyrion's heart felt heavy as lead. He had gambled everything on saving Shae, and now he was to pay the final price. They took him not to the black cells but to a small guarded chamber in Maegor's holdfast. Cersei wanted him under watch, certain he might attempt some final trick. The guards chained him to a chair posted outside the door. And there Tyrion sat, gazing at the single high window from which he could see only a square of blue sky. The day dragged on. No visitors came. His mouth was parched, his throat raw. Now and again he heard footsteps, hushed voices. The city was abuzz with the news. Tywin Lannister was dead and Tyrion would die for it. By nightfall, Tyrion dozed fitfully. In his dreams, he saw Shae's face wide with terror as she ran through narrow alleys trying to escape the city. He saw Varys's calm, detached expression, the eyes of a spider weaving webs. He saw Tywin's face twisted in anger and pain. He woke with a jerk when the door swung open. He squinted, seeing only a tall silhouette. Then a torch flared. To his shock, it was Varys, cloaked in brown rags, his soft slippers silent on the floor. My lord, Varys whispered, crossing the room. You are chained. Gods be good, we must hurry. I have only moments before the guards return. Tyrion's eyes widened. Varys produced a small pick from his sleeve. With surprising deftness, he began working on Tyrion's shackles. Shae is safe. I managed to sneak her out before the chaos took hold. She is on a ship bound for Pentos. She will be well cared for. But you seven hells, Tyrion, you were supposed to find a way out for yourself as well. Tyrion tried to focus, relief at hearing Shae was safe washing over him. I had no illusions that I would save myself. Varys's expression was grim. Well, you should have. I do not want to see King's Landing devour you. There is still a chance, small but real, to flee. Even now, the city is in uproar. There are secret passages from Maegor's Holdfast. I've used them before. Once free of the Red Keep, I can hide you until the dust settles, then secure a passage across the narrow sea. The lock on the shackle clicked, and Tyrion's right hand came free. Varys hurriedly set to work on the other. Tyrion stared, his mind reeling. This was a chance to live, to escape the vengeance of the Lannisters. He could join Shae, or at least flee to Pentos, Bravos, anywhere but King's Landing. Yet a deep guilt gnawed at him. He had spilled his father's blood. Perhaps this was the justice he deserved. But then he pictured Shae alone, waiting for him somewhere far away, and he felt the faint stirrings of hope. The second lock gave. Tyrion was free of his chains. Varys helped him to stand. Tyrion's legs trembled. Cersei will hunt me to the ends of the earth, Tyrion muttered. She might, Varys conceded. But she will be busied consolidating her power here. Her father's death has thrown the monarchy into turmoil. Let us go. Now. They slipped into the corridor, which Varys found momentarily empty. Tyrion's heart pounded. The palace walls seemed to close in on him. But Varys moved with confidence, guiding him through concealed doors and hidden passages that Tyrion never knew existed. They descended musty staircases, waded through an old cistern. They emerged in a dim corridor near the dungeons. At one point they heard a group of guards approaching. Tyrion and Varys pressed themselves into a dark recess. The guards thundered past, their conversation about how the imp would die tomorrow morning. Once they were gone, Tyrion and Varys continued on. At last, after twisting and turning through labyrinthine tunnels, they reached a small postern gate. One guard stood watch. Varys stepped forward, brandishing a seal of official business. The guard seemed suspicious, but Varys's silver tongue and a heavy pouch of gold convinced him to let them pass. They stepped out into the humid night air, beyond the walls of the Red Keep near the eastern edge that overlooked Blackwater Bay. A small skiff bobbed below, manned by one of Varys's helpers, a sallow-faced youth who silently offered them a hand aboard. They climbed in, and the youth began rowing them away from the castle's looming walls, out into the bay. Tyrion collapsed into the prow of the skiff, letting the night breeze wash over him. His heart hammered with both relief and dread. King's Landing's lights glittered behind them, an ominous backdrop. Tyrion wondered if he would ever see it again. He felt no pang of nostalgia, no sorrow for leaving behind the court. All he felt was exhaustion and a faint flicker of hope. Shae was safe. The monstrous figure of Tywin Lannister no longer overshadowed him. That alone might be worth the cost of his soul. Varys, seated across from him, watched him carefully. If the winds favor us, Varys said in a hushed tone, we'll reach a ship by dawn. Then you'll need to disappear, likely to Essos. The Queen's reach is long, but not endless. Tyrion nodded wearily. I have gold hidden away. I can hire swords if needed. But first, I want only to see Shae again, to look into her eyes and tell her. He choked up unexpectedly. The day's horrors, the father he had murdered, the city that condemned him, all sank in. Varys placed a gentle hand on Tyrion's arm. You have risked much. And lost much. Only time will tell if it was worth it. But for now, you must survive. Tyrion wiped the corner of his eye with the back of his hand, angry at himself for showing weakness. I must, he echoed. The boat glided farther into the darkness, the rower pulling them steadily away from the Red Keep, away from the headsman's block that awaited Tyrion in the morning. On the horizon, faint lights of a larger ship glimmered. Tyrion closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he stared up at the sky where stars hung like scattered diamonds. He recalled the swirl of madness that had led him here, the love of a woman scorned by the city, the father who withheld all affection and respect, the sister who wanted him dead, and the cunning secret lord who had helped him enact the unthinkable. He knew his life would never be the same. He had poisoned the greatest lion of the West, fracturing the foundation of House Lannister. He was now truly alone, adrift in a world that would hunt him. But he had saved Shae. That meant something. Perhaps it meant everything. As the skiff drew closer to the ship that would ferry him across the narrow sea, Tyrion lifted his head, feeling the salt wind on his face. The fear remained, a trembling shadow lurking in his chest. But there was also a strange, tenuous promise in the wind. Freedom from Tywin's shadow. Freedom to be himself, to forge a new destiny. In that fragile moment, Tyrion took a quavering breath and remembered how, as a boy, he had once dreamed of traveling the world, seeing the wonders that lay beyond Westeros. He had always been ridiculed for it, but now, ironically, that dream lay within reach. If he survived, if he could navigate this new life, perhaps he would find a measure of peace. He closed his eyes. Shae was free. That was the victory he clung to in the darkness. It would have to be enough. The sea stretched out before him, boundless and perilous, yet full of possibility. Tomorrow, the city would wake to learn the imp had vanished. Cersei's triumphant noose would be left empty, and House Lannister would never be the same. He took one last look over his shoulder at the fading outline of the Red Keep, then turned away, letting the water carry him onward. Under the silent stars, Tyrion Lannister drifted toward a new world, carrying with him the memory of what he had done and the one person for whom he had done it. And for the first time in what felt like ages, he allowed himself a sliver of hope that somewhere, far from King's Landing, he might find a life that was truly his own. Tyrion stood at the prow of the small skiff, the night wind rustling his hair, his mind abuzz with the enormity of his escape and the violence it had taken to secure it. For so long, he had been ensnared in the schemes of others, never free from the watchful gaze of the Red Keep. Now, in the quiet darkness with only Varys, the sallow-faced youth rowing them through the calm waters of Blackwater Bay, and the hiss of the wind on the waves, Tyrion felt the first tendril of possibility. That possibility brought a prickling sensation to the nape of his neck, part fear, part exhilaration. He had murdered the one man who had shaped his entire life, rescued the one woman who had granted him hope, and betrayed the family name under which he had lived in scorn. If he dwelled on it too long, the guilt and confusion might paralyze him. So he focused on the next breath, the next moment, the gentle slap of water against the hull. They reached a larger ship moored far from shore, its shape a hulking shadow outlined by faint lanterns. Varys indicated it with a flick of his wrist, speaking in a hushed voice. A merchant vessel bound for Pentos. The captain is amenable to certain requests of mine. We will travel swiftly. Pentos will be safer for a time, although safety is always relative where the Queen Regent's wrath is concerned. His tone was soft, his features half lost in the gloom, yet Tyrion sensed the tension thrumming beneath his calm words. Varys was a man who preferred to watch events from his web of secrets, rarely stepping into the open. Tonight, he risked everything to deliver Tyrion to freedom. Or perhaps Varys had other, deeper reasons. With the spider, there was always more to the tale. The rower guided them alongside the ship and a rope ladder came tumbling down the vessel's side. Varys motioned for Tyrion to climb first. He forced his weary limbs to comply, his fingers trembling on the rough rope. He was hungry, weak, and the swirl of the water beneath him made him dizzy, but he clenched his teeth and ascended. At the top, a sailor with a torch peered at him, expression flicking between curiosity and alarm. Varys slipped up behind Tyrion, then pressed a small purse into the sailor's hand, whispering a few words. The man nodded brusquely, gestured for them to follow, and led them to a cramped cabin. Inside, a lantern hung from a low beam, casting flickering light across a narrow bunk. The room smelled of old fish and damp wood. Tyrion collapsed onto the bunk with a sigh, his breath hitching, exhaustion spiking through him. Varys drew the cabin door shut, then stood for a moment watching Tyrion, whose eyes were half-lidded with fatigue. "Rest if you can," Varys murmured. "We'll be underway soon enough. There are fresh clothes in the chest and water in the jug. It's not the comfort of a Lannister bedchamber, but it must suffice." Tyrion roused himself just enough to push himself upright. "Shae," he managed, voice scratchy. "You said she's safe. I need to know exactly where." Varys inclined his head. "I managed to send her from the city 2 days before your trial began in earnest. She sailed on a ship crewed by men loyal to my coin, men who know how to ask few questions. Once she arrives in Pentos, she'll be sheltered at a manse belonging to Magister Illyrio Mopatis, an old ally of mine. He has a fondness for collecting interesting souls. She'll be quite comfortable there, I imagine, until you join her." Relief flooded Tyrion, though it mingled with caution. Illyrio Mopatis was reputedly wealthy, gluttonous, and cunning as a fox. Yet if he was indeed an ally to Varys, Tyrion might find a safe harbor under the Magister's roof. "Then I need only survive the journey," Tyrion said softly. "So be it." Varys's gaze flicked over Tyrion, sympathy glimmering in the dark of his eyes. "I have never seen you so forlorn, my lord. You have endured much." A short laugh escaped Tyrion. "I killed my father, Varys. Not with a sword thrust in the night, but with a poison poured into his cup as he watched. I am not so sure I deserve sympathy." Varys inclined his head, lips thinning. "We live in a world where men commit worse crimes for far lesser reasons. Mayhap you did what you must. Rest. We can speak more later." He slipped from the cabin, leaving Tyrion alone. Weariness clung to Tyrion's limbs, and the small bunk called to him with irresistible promise. For a moment, he let himself sink into the worn straw mattress. The boards beneath him creaked as the ship began to sway gently, the sounds of the harbor muffled by thick timbers. Something about the motion lulled him, though his mind churned with regrets and recollections. His body was spent. His eyes fluttered shut, and sleep crept upon him like a shadow on cat's paws. Morning came, or at least Tyrion assumed it was morning from the change in the quality of light. He roused to find a new set of clothes folded neatly on a stool. They were plain, simple trousers and a loose tunic of coarse cloth, but far better than the ragged garments he'd been forced to wear in the black cells. He splashed his face with water from a chipped basin, then changed. In the tiny mirror affixed to the cabin's wall, he caught a glimpse of himself, hollow-cheeked, eyes bloodshot, hair matted from sweat. How far he had fallen from the days when he was master of coin, second son of the greatest lord in Westeros, a dwarf who tried to mask insecurity with wit and wine. Now he was simply a fugitive. He heard soft footsteps outside, then Varys's voice. "Tyrion? May I enter?" Tyrion opened the cabin door to find Varys accompanied by a short, wiry man with a tanned face and salt-crusted hair, likely the captain. Varys introduced him as Torias from the Summer Isles by way of Lys. The man spoke in stilted common tongue. "We sail soon as tide is right. You will stay here? Or want food up deck?" Tyrion started to respond when his stomach growled, reminding him of how little he'd eaten for days. "Food," he said firmly. "And if I might get some fresh air, so much the better." Torias inclined his head, gesturing for them to follow. The corridor was cramped and smelled of pitch and salt. Tyrion half expected suspicious glares from the crewmen, but most averted their eyes or greeted him with a polite nod as if they had been instructed not to pester him. Clearly, Varys had arranged everything with a generous purse or perhaps some well-crafted threats. On deck, the sun was bright, reflecting off the rippling bay with dazzling brilliance. Seagulls wheeled overhead, squawking raucously. A breeze stirred the sails and the ship lurched into motion, casting off from the anchorage. King's Landing lay behind them in a hazy smear of stone walls and gleaming spires, the Red Keep's outline scarcely visible in the early morning sun. Tyrion felt an odd combination of dread and relief as the distance between himself and the city grew with each passing moment. He found a spot near the railing, resting his elbows on the wood, inhaling the briny air. Varys joined him, silent for a time. Eventually, one of the crewmen delivered a bowl of porridge, stale bread, and a chunk of salted fish. Tyrion ate with minimal complaint, though the porridge was watery and the fish overly pungent. Each bite reminded him he was alive, that he had escaped the noose or the executioner's axe. He forced the food down, ignoring the pangs of revulsion. "They will discover your absence soon, if they have not already," Varys said quietly, scanning the horizon. "Cersei is no doubt apoplectic. She will command the gold cloaks to search every corner of the city, the dungeons, the docks. But unless she's learned to fly, she cannot catch us now." Tyrion's lips twisted into a joyless smile. "What sweet music that is, though I wonder if she'll chase me across the sea. House Lannister's gold can reach far indeed." "It can," Varys agreed. "But she has other troubles. With Tywin gone, the old alliances hang in precarious balance. The Tyrells will press their advantage. The Martells may decide this is the perfect time to take their long-delayed vengeance. Riverrun is still in disarray, the Greyjoys maraud the northern coasts, and half the realm is still reeling from war. Cersei must hold the lion's share of power now, or else risk losing everything. She'll be too busy to send an army scouring Essos. And even if she does, well, Essos is vast, and your name will not carry the same weight there as it does in Westeros." "Meaning I can fade into obscurity?" Tyrion murmured. "A dwarf lost among the sprawl of the free cities?" "Precisely." Tyrion gazed at the diminishing shape of King's Landing, remembering the myriad humiliations he had suffered there. Would he truly miss any of it? Even so, leaving Westeros felt like slicing off a limb. It was still his home, still the country where he'd been born, raised, despised, yet also occasionally loved, or at least tolerated. "Varys," he said after a moment, "why help me? You could have allowed me to die at Cersei's hand, or used my predicament to your advantage in some other way. Yet here you are." Varys's soft voice lowered. "I have no love for Cersei Lannister or her brand of cruelty, and I have found your mind, a rare thing in these times of stupidity and ambition. Perhaps you can still do some good, though I suspect your path is uncertain. Let us just say you intrigue me, Tyrion Lannister, and the realm may yet have need of you." Tyrion mulled that over, wondering at the hidden layers of meaning. It was rarely possible to glean Varys's true designs, but in that moment, Tyrion found himself strangely grateful. "Very well, I accept your cryptic friendship." They fell silent again, listening to the creak of the timbers, the flutter of sails. As the day wore on, the shoreline faded, replaced by the endless blue of open sea. Tyrion kept to himself, dozing in the shade of some barrels, or pacing the deck when his thoughts gnawed at him too fiercely. Bits of conversation in Valyrian and the tongues of the summer isles drifted around him. The crew largely ignored him, focused on their duties. Varys came and went, presumably smoothing matters with the captain or ensuring no one questioned the presence of such a peculiar passenger. On the second evening, a storm rolled in from the east, whipping the sea into choppy waves. The sails rattled and the crew scrambled to secure lines. The wind lashed at Tyrion's hair, salt spray stinging his eyes. He stumbled across the wet deck, cursing every time the ship pitched. In truth, though, the storm felt almost like a baptism, a violent cleansing of his old life. He clung to the railing, drenched to the skin, bracing against the wind. For the first time in days, he felt fully awake, alert to every sensation. Thunder rumbled overhead, lightning crackled across the dark sky, and Tyrion roared wordlessly into the gale as if challenging the heavens themselves. No one heard him over the roaring wind, but the act felt cathartic. By dawn, the storm had abated, leaving the ship battered but intact. Tyrion slumped onto a coil of rope, exhausted yet oddly alive. Varys emerged, hair plastered to his head, his fine slippers ruined by the water. He eyed Tyrion as if uncertain whether the dwarf had gone mad. Tyrion merely offered a crooked grin as if to say, "I have survived worse storms." The next days blurred together in a cycle of restless nights and anxious thoughts. Tyrion dreaded sleep because his dreams brought him back to his father's bedside, replaying the moment the poison was poured. In those nightmares, Tywin sometimes rose from the bed to strangle him, face locked in a rictus of outrage. Other times, it was Shae who appeared, calling him a monster, condemning him for his cruelty. He would jolt awake in a cold sweat, disoriented, his heart racing. When morning light seeped through the cabin's narrow porthole, he often found himself trembling with relief that the nightmares weren't real. But the guilt never fully left. Tyrion pushed it aside by reminding himself that Shae was safe and that Tywin would have destroyed them both if given the chance. The world was harsh and he had chosen to fight it on its own terms. After nearly 2 weeks at sea, Toryas informed them they would soon arrive at Pentos. From the ship's railing, Tyrion beheld the distant silhouette of the city sprawling along the coast, its walls and spires tinted gold in the late afternoon sun. Pentos had a certain grandeur, though it was not as large as Volantis or as vibrant as Braavos. Still, the city bristled with trade from across the narrow sea, ships from Lys, Myr, Tyrosh, and further east. Tyrion felt a stirring of apprehension. Though far from his sister's grasp, he was entering a realm of new intrigues, new potential betrayals. The free cities were not known for their honesty or their mercy. Yet somewhere here, perhaps, was Shae waiting for him under Illyrio's roof. The ship glided into Pentos's harbor amid a flotilla of merchant vessels, fishing boats, and sleek galleys from distant lands. The air smelled of spices and brine, a pungent mixture that made Tyrion's nose twitch. He and Varys gathered their meager belongings. As they prepared to disembark, Toryas reminded them that Pentos could be treacherous for newcomers, especially those with enemies. Tyrion forced a smile, telling the captain, "I'm well acquainted with treachery. But thank you for the warning." They made their way down the gangplank onto a bustling wharf. Dockworkers shouted in overlapping tongues as crates were unloaded and cargo tallied. A warm wind carried the scents of exotic foods and unwashed bodies. Tyrion's gaze swept the chaos, noting the fluid swirl of sailors, merchants, courtesans, and pickpockets. It was a frenetic world, brimming with color and danger. Varys hired a litter with a curt word to a local driver, then gestured for Tyrion to climb inside. The litter, an enclosed carriage supported by 4 sweating porters, smelled of incense, its cushions tattered but still soft enough to sink into. Varys settled opposite Tyrion, drawing the curtains for some privacy. As the porters lifted and the litter jerked into motion, Tyrion found himself peering out through a small gap in the curtains. Pentos sprawled in every direction, low buildings topped with domes or slanting roofs, mosaic tiles glittering in the sun, narrow streets crammed with stalls selling everything from cheap wine to perfumed silks. Children darted between passers-by, chasing each other with shrill cries. The air was thick with humidity, and Tyrion was glad to be out of the direct sun. Despite his anxiety, a thread of curiosity twined through him. This was the first time in many years he had been in Essos, and even then it had been to the Westerosi outpost in the free city of Tyrosh, never here. Pentos had its own flavor, a sense of ancient wealth and cunning that predated many a Westerosi house. "How far to Illyrio's manse?" Tyrion asked, mind straying to Shae. "Not far," Varys said. "He keeps a lavish estate beyond the city walls, surrounded by orchards and gardens. Once we've arrived, we can speak privately. Illyrio may have some interest in your predicament." Tyrion snorted. "I imagine he's already paid to house me, or you wouldn't have found such easy passage." Varys neither confirmed nor denied, which was answer enough. Tyrion tried to relax, ignoring the sweat beading on his forehead. He pictured Shae's dark eyes, her hands soft against his, her laughter that once banished his loneliness. He had believed himself unlovable for so long. He had believed a whore's affection was all he could ever hope for. And if it was false, if it was just for coin, it had still felt real enough at times to keep him from despair. That was worth something. Outside the city walls, the roads became less congested. The litter jostled along a dusty track lined with merchant caravans, peasants hauling goods by mule, and travelers heading to or from Pentos. Orchards sprawled on either side of the road, orange trees, pomegranates, figs, and white-walled villas rose against the azure sky. After another half-hour of travel, Varys parted the curtains and pointed. "There it is, Illyrio Mopatis's humble abode." Humble was hardly the word for it. The man soared behind high walls of cream-colored stone, topped by golden domes and intricate spires. A broad gate of wrought iron stood open, flanked by guards in matching livery. The litter was borne through a courtyard lined with statues and flowering shrubs, culminating at a grand entryway where a set of marble steps led to a massive set of oak doors. Tyrion's eyes traveled the opulence, startled by the extravagance even as he remembered that Illyrio Mopatis was rumored to be one of the richest men in Pentos. The litter came to a halt. Two servants rushed forward to open the door and help Tyrion descend. He stumbled on the step, knees stiff from the ride, but quickly righted himself. Varys emerged behind him, offering a small smile. Inside, the entrance hall soared to a lofty ceiling painted with swirling images of dragons and phoenixes. Pillars of veined marble supported the arches, and plush carpets spread across the mosaic floor. Light filtered through stained glass windows, casting jewel-colored shapes on the polished stones. Illyrio Mopatis appeared at the top of a short flight of stairs, arms outstretched in welcome. He was a vast man, not just tall but amply fleshed, clad in silks that shimmered with each step. His oiled beard fell in two braided forks, bound with gold rings. He wore rings on almost every finger, some set with gemstones the size of grapes. Yet his eyes, small and dark, sparkled with intelligence, and a sly smile curved his lips. "Varys, dear friend," he boomed, voice echoing. "Welcome back to my modest home. And this must be the famous Tyrion Lannister, newly arrived in Pentos." He bowed with surprising grace for a man of his girth, then motioned for them to approach. "Come, I have prepared a feast. You must be starving after your journey." Tyrion gave a stiff nod. He had expected some grand show of hospitality, yet he couldn't help feeling like a piece on Illyrio's Sivas board. Without any other choice, he followed Illyrio and Varys through a series of corridors into a spacious dining hall. There, long tables groaned under platters of roast duck, spiced lamb, candied fruits, honey cakes, and flagons of wine. Servants hovered, ready to pour, carve, or fetch at a nod. The aromas made Tyrion's stomach rumble painfully. He had to remember the last time he'd had a decent meal was years ago in King's Landing, or so it felt. Illyrio chuckled at the sound of Tyrion's hunger. "Sit, my lord, sit. Eat your fill. You as well, Varys." Varys offered a polite smile. "You were too generous, Illyrio." They settled onto cushioned chairs around a smaller side table meant for more intimate conversation. Tyrion wondered about Shae's whereabouts but decided to bide his time. Illyrio would eventually bring up the matter, or Varys would. For the moment, food was too enticing to refuse. He loaded a plate with slices of lamb, succulent and dripping with juice, accompanied by roasted onions and a thick wedge of bread still warm from the oven. He savored each bite, letting the flavors wash away the stale rations of the sea. Conversation began lightly, with Illyrio regaling them with tales of trade caravans from the Dothraki Sea, the seasonal fluctuations of spice prices, and rumors of unrest in Slaver's Bay. Tyrion listened with half an ear, more interested in scanning the hall for any sign that Shae might appear. None did. Eventually, when the first edge of hunger was dulled, Tyrion ventured, "I'm indebted to you for your hospitality, Magister. Doubly so if you have taken in a certain friend of mine." Illyrio's dark eyes flickered. "Ah, yes. The young lady. She's here, quite safe, though still nervous about her predicament." He took a dainty sip of wine. "You must realize, my lord, that my generosity does not come without consideration for the consequences. Harboring you, especially given your current standing in Westeros, places me in a precarious position if ever the Queen Regent extends her reach." Tyrion dabbed at his mouth with a napkin, choosing his words carefully. "Cersei has more pressing matters at present, or so we believe. And if the day comes when she tries to bring her justice across the sea, I'd wager Pentos would not greet her as a liberator." Illyrio chuckled, causing his jowls to wobble. "You speak truly. Still, I must keep my own interests secure. You understand." Tyrion inclined his head. He understood all too well. Men like Illyrio always calculated profit against risk. Varys intervened smoothly. "For the moment, all we ask is discretion and shelter. Tyrion will not remain here forever. There are many potential paths before him, but in any case, it should not disturb your other dealings. And you do love to collect interesting people." Illyrio smiled indulgently, as if conceding the point. "Indeed I do. Very well. The girl is resting in one of the guest pavilions in my gardens. If you wish, I can have a servant guide you there after the meal." Tyrion's heart rate quickened, relief and trepidation mixing. "I would appreciate that greatly." Soon after, Illyrio rang a small gong, summoning a slender serving girl who led Tyrion through a maze of corridors and out into a sprawling garden. The scents of jasmine and night-blooming flowers hung heavy in the warm air. In the center of the garden lay a cluster of tiled pavilions, each with a low awning for shade. The serving girl stopped before one with carved wooden doors. She tapped lightly, then pushed them open. "My lord," she whispered, bowing. Tyrion stepped inside. The interior was dim, lit by oil lamps set on low tables. Cushions lined the walls and gauzy curtains hung from carved wooden screens. At first he saw no one. Then, from behind one of the curtains, Shae emerged. She wore a simple gown of pale blue, her hair loose, her eyes wide with apprehension. The moment she saw Tyrion, her face shifted from fear to astonishment to something like joy, though it was tinged with uncertainty. They stood there, neither speaking for a moment, as if neither dared to believe. Finally, Tyrion stepped forward. "Shae," he said, voice raw. "Are you all right?" He felt sudden tears threaten behind his eyes, the swirl of guilt and relief and longing crashing through him. She approached him, arms trembling, and then threw them around his shoulders, burying her face in his neck. He felt her warm breath against him, her heart pounding. "I've been so scared," she whispered, voice muffled against his collar. "I didn't know if you were alive. I didn't know if Cersei, if she..." Words failed her, and she just held on, gripping him as if he were the last solid thing in a world of shifting sands. Tyrion breathed in the smell of her hair, the scent of lilies from some Pentoshi perfume. He let himself sink into the embrace, arms encircling her waist. His own heart hammered against his ribs, and for a moment they were the only two people in existence. "I'm here," he murmured, though he wondered how long he could keep that promise. He drew back slightly to look at her face, shining with unshed tears. "Varys said he got you out before the trial." She nodded, pulling him down onto the cushions. "He told me I had to leave, that they would force me to testify against you if I stayed. He said your sister would not rest until she had used me however she wanted, then probably had me killed. He had a plan. We left at night, boarded a ship. I didn't know where he was taking me at first. But he explained, said it was all to protect me and protect you." Her voice wavered. "He said you might not survive. And if you did, maybe you'd come here." Tyrion traced a hand through her hair. He marveled at how a single touch could ground him, soothing the raging sea within. "He's risked more than I suspected," Tyrion said. "But we made it. And my father," he hesitated, swallowing hard. "My father is no longer a threat. Ever again." She studied him closely, her hands stroking his arms. "Varys told me it was poison." She paused, conflict visible in her eyes. You did that?" He stared at the mosaic floor, a swirl of color at the edges of his vision. "He would have destroyed me, us. He was never going to let me live, not once Cersei had set the hounds upon me. But I'm sorry. I know it's a heavy thing to carry." Her breath caught. "He was cruel to you, always. I remember how you spoke of him. I just never thought," she trailed off, not finishing the thought, "but he heard it anyway, never thought you'd actually kill him." After a heartbeat, she clasped his hands, pressing them to her chest. "It was for me, wasn't it?" Tyrion felt a wave of shame that he couldn't entirely decipher. He had done it partly for her, partly out of raw fury at Tywin, partly to avenge a lifetime of scorn. But yes, if not for the threat to Shae, perhaps he wouldn't have found the will to do it. Yes, he answered quietly. Her lips trembled. She bent her head, brushing them across his knuckles. Then I'm grateful and I'm sorry. She kissed his fingers, tears slipping down her cheeks. You did it to save me, and now you bear all this guilt on top of everything else. I'm so sorry. He cupped her face, brushing away a tear with his thumb. Don't be. Just be with me here, now. I don't know what the future holds, but at least we have this moment. They lingered in each other's arms, the hush of the pavilion broken only by the distant murmurs of wind through the garden. For a time, Tyrion let himself forget the looming threats, the uncertain alliances, the weight of a realm left in chaos. He was with Shae, alive, heart beating in his chest. It was enough. Eventually, she coaxed him to lie down on the cushions. He settled beside her, pulling the sheer curtains for a semblance of privacy. His eyelids felt heavy after the day's travel, the stress that had coiled tight within his chest. She stroked his hair as he drifted in and out of shallow sleep, neither of them fully releasing the other. If the rest of the world was locked outside that pavilion, so be it. When Tyrion woke again, dusky light filtered through the curtains, casting the room in amber. Shae had dozed off, one arm flung across his chest. A pang of tenderness surprised him. He had never felt so protective of another person in his life, except perhaps Jaime once. But that bond had been twisted by events. This, however flawed, felt pure. He carefully extricated himself without waking her, then crossed to the door, slipping outside into the warm evening air. He found Illyrio waiting in the garden, sampling from a platter of fresh figs and dates. A pair of torches flickered, warding off the encroaching darkness. The Magister beckoned Tyrion over. I trust your reunion was agreeable, he said with a knowing smile. Tyrion resisted the urge to scowl. He disliked how Illyrio's tone implied a kind of indulgent amusement, as though they were all pieces in his private game. But he reminded himself that Illyrio's hospitality was the reason he was not rotting in a dungeon or losing his head on the scaffold. It was. Tyrion replied curtly. Illyrio popped a fig into his mouth, chewing thoughtfully. And do you plan to remain here, with your lady, indefinitely? Pentos can be pleasant, but I sense you have other destinies to chase, and not just because you carry that famous name. Tyrion wiped a sheen of sweat from his brow. I'm not fool enough to believe I can remain hidden forever in your manor, living off your generosity. If I do, it will attract attention, especially if Cersei sends spies. But I have no immediate plan beyond ensuring Shae stays safe. He paused, his mind cycling through the possibilities. Perhaps he could move further east to the lands by the Jade Sea or north to Braavos. Or might it be safer to find a small corner of Essos where no one would think to look for him? Illyrio's eyes gleamed. There are those in this world who might benefit from the sharp mind of a Lannister outcast. Power is shifting in strange ways. Have you heard of Daenerys Targaryen? The last scion of the Dragon Kings? Tyrion frowned. He had heard rumors, a Targaryen girl in the east, the mother of dragons, liberating slaves in Astapor, Ukai, and Meereen. I have heard whispers, he said carefully. Illyrio nodded. She has 3 dragons, grown larger by the day. She rules Meereen now, trying to hold it as a free city without slavery. The other cities fight her. She has enemies on every side and likely within. But if she prevails, if she should decide to cross the narrow sea one day, he spread his hands. The realm might be shaken to its core. She is the rightful heir in some eyes. And your sister sits the throne, or rather, Tommen does, though all know who truly rules. You might find it interesting to be at Daenerys' side when she makes her move. Tyrion felt a flicker of intrigue, swiftly followed by wariness. A Targaryen with dragons, rumored to be unstoppable. Why do you care? I recall hearing you once funded her wedding to Khal Drogo. That means you've had your hand in her fate for years. Illyrio smiled benignly, the corners of his mouth curving beneath his braided beard. I did. As I said, I collect interesting people. I make investments, some of which pay off in time. Young Daenerys might well prove the best investment yet if she can steady her course, if she can learn to rule. Tyrion wasn't sure if he believed in the idea of a Targaryen restoration. The Targaryens had been gone from the throne for decades, and the realm had changed since. But the notion of a new queen, untainted by Lannister or Baratheon blood, intrigued him. And if Cersei was forced to contend with dragons, that image brought a sharp smile to Tyrion's lips. Still, that was a distant possibility. It sounds like a grand project. But I'm not certain I want to leap from the frying pan into the fire. I just escaped one war. I'm not eager to dive into another. Illyrio seemed unoffended. Of course, but I suspect fate may steer you as it will. If you do decide to go east, I can arrange passage, introductions, a comfortable journey." He paused, selecting a fresh figure. "In any case, you and your lady are welcome to remain for as long as you like, within reason. Enjoy the safety, enjoy the food, but do keep in mind that my hospitality has its limits." Tyrion understood the subtext. Eventually, Illyrio would expect a return on his generosity, whether in the form of political favors or some role in the grand scheme to topple the Lannisters in Westeros. The thought left Tyrion uneasy, but for now, safety was precious currency, and he could not afford to be choosy. He thanked Illyrio, then returned to the pavilion, where Shae still dozed fitfully. He sat watching her, the lamplight tracing the lines of her face, remembering how he had found her so long ago in a Lannister camp, how he had loved her in a city that despised him. He wondered if this respite in Pentos would last, or if some new wave of conflict would sweep them away. For the moment, though, he told himself to be content with small mercies. Days lengthened into weeks. Tyrion and Shae were given a comfortable suite of rooms in the manor, overlooking a garden of pomegranate trees. The thick walls shielded them from the bustle of Pentos, though sometimes Tyrion wandered into the city with Varys in disguise, exploring markets filled with perfumes and painted vases, meeting merchants of every stripe. He made sure never to reveal his name, always wearing a hooded cloak. Most took him for a curiosity, a dwarf from the Summer Isles or the Narrow Sea, and paid him little mind beyond the occasional jeer or stare. Tyrion felt a pang remembering how King's Landing had been only marginally more accepting. He had no illusions about ever escaping that brand of scorn. Yet the anonymity did have its benefits. Here he wasn't Tyrion Lannister, Rev. Ald Kinslayer, he was just a passing stranger. Varys remained a silent presence, drifting in and out of the manse. Sometimes he vanished for days, presumably traveling or sending his little birds to gather intelligence. Sometimes he joined Illyrio for private conversations that ended with both men wearing guarded expressions. Tyrion sensed that the spider had grand designs, though he was not privy to them yet. Instead, Tyrion spent much of his time reading through Illyrio's vast library, scrolls of Valyrian history, dusty ledgers from Braavos, treatises on dragon lore. He felt his mind coming alive after the stultifying dread of the Red Keep's dungeon. When Shae joined him in the library, she would attempt to read the simpler texts, though she grew frustrated at times, complaining that all the old histories bored her. Tyrion sometimes teased her gently, other times set the books aside to walk with her through the orchard. Her presence soothed him, even if they both knew their existence here was precarious. Every so often, the nightmares returned. He'd jolt awake in a cold sweat, convinced he was still shackled in the dark cells, hearing his father's final rasping breaths. Shae would stir and cradle him, pressing her face to his shoulder, murmuring soft words in his ear. He never spoke of the details, only clung to her until the terrors receded. Yet the guilt remained an iron band around his heart. Some mornings he avoided her eyes, worried she might see the murderer lurking inside. But he forced himself to remember Tywin would have killed them both. The act had been necessary. That was the refrain he repeated day after day, hoping that someday he might believe it wholeheartedly. Meanwhile, news trickled across the sea. Varys whispered updates in the quiet corners of Illyrio's garden. Cersei had consolidated power, naming herself Queen Regent more brazenly, overshadowing little King Tommen. Kevan Lannister had withdrawn to Casterly Rock, refusing to remain in King's Landing without Tywin's moderating influence. The Iron Bank of Braavos was displeased with the Crown's mounting debts. The Tyrells were pressing their advantage, expecting new privileges for Margaery's marriage to Tommen. In short, chaos brewed, and Cersei was at the heart of it, her cunning matched only by her growing paranoia. If rumors were to be believed, she had put bounties on Tyrion's head that would make even the bravest Sellsword salivate. Yet thousands of miles and a sea lay between them, and Tyrion felt only a faint tremor of dread. Cersei was formidable, yes, but not omnipotent. One afternoon, while strolling through the orchard, Shae paused beneath a fig tree, turning to him with a pensive look. "We can't stay here forever, can we?" Tyrion followed the path of her gaze. The orchard walls rose in the distance, a picturesque barrier. "I doubt it," he admitted. "Illyrio is patient, but eventually he'll want us gone, or he'll want us to serve his ends. And it's hardly a life for us to hide behind walls. We'd just be exchanging one golden cage for another." Shae toyed with the hem of her dress, brown knit. "We could try to find a quiet place, far from here. Maybe in another free city, or even further east. Someplace Cersei's men would never look." He nodded. "I've thought of that too. Perhaps Norvos or Qohor, where the forests are deep and travelers rarely pass. Or even the Jade Sea if we're willing to brave the long voyage. We could vanish into anonymity. She reached for his hand, her tone earnest. We could be anyone we want to be, Tyrion. That's what you always said, wasn't it? That the world was big and King's Landing was just a corner of it. He squeezed her fingers gently. Yes, I did say that. Yet there was a restlessness stirring in him he couldn't quite quell. A part of him wanted to vanish, to leave the politics of Westeros behind and live simply, far from prying eyes. But another part, perhaps the part that had once yearned for his father's approval, whispered that the realm was in dire straits, that incompetent or cruel rulers held sway, and that perhaps he, Tyrion Lannister, could still do something about it. He wasn't sure which impulse would win out in the end. A few nights later, he encountered Varys in the library. The Spider was alone, studying a map of the eastern coast. He glanced up as Tyrion entered, beckoning him over. The flickering lamplight cast wavering shadows across the table. I've been tracking developments around Slavers Bay, Varys said in a low voice. The Sons of the Harpy are making trouble for Daenerys in Meereen, murdering freedmen in the streets. She holds the city, but at a cost. Meanwhile, Yunkai and Volantis conspire to reclaim their slave trade. Tyrion leaned in, scanning the map. So the Targaryen queen is embroiled in a quagmire? Indeed. She has dragons, yet they are not fully tamed. She has an army of freed slaves and unsullied, but the city's old masters plot against her. And her advisors are varied in loyalty and wisdom. If she loses Meereen, her cause falters, perhaps permanently. Tyrion tapped a finger on the painted representation of the city near the coast. And how does that concern me? Varys gave him a long, measured look. It might not concern you at all unless you wish it to. But consider, if Daenerys falls, the last Targaryen claim vanishes and Cersei's hold on the Iron Throne grows ever more secure. If Daenerys rises, well, it could remake the Seven Kingdoms. You might find a place in that new order if you so desired. Tyrion snorted softly, stepping back from the table. You speak as if I crave power. I used to, maybe. But what has it ever brought me besides grief? Varys tilted his head. I speak as if you crave a better realm, one that is not crushed under Cersei's madness or the old vendettas. You once stood for the common people of King's Landing during Stannis' siege. You tried to rule with justice in your own way. Tyrion's memory flicked to those desperate days defending the city from fire and steel while Joffrey cowered and Cersei drank herself into oblivion. He had done well, or so he'd thought, but the realm had rewarded him with a sham trial and scorn. I did, he said bitterly, and look where that got me. Varys' eyes gleamed. All the more reason to fight for a world where such injustices do not remain the norm. But I won't press you further. The choice is yours. Still, if you do decide to travel to Meereen to see this Daenerys Targaryen with your own eyes, Illyrio can provide the means. And I can provide a network of information. Tyrion left the library with more questions than answers. That night, as Shae slept, he stared at the ceiling, replaying Varys' words. Images of Daenerys Targaryen's rumored dragons seared his mind. The realm was like a tinderbox ready to ignite at the smallest spark. And across the sea, a young queen wrestled with a city of former slaves trying to forge a new order. Tyrion almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. A dwarf from House Lannister wandering Essos to advise the last Targaryen on how to claim the Iron Throne? It sounded like the stuff of a jongler's tale. Yet a faint excitement stirred within him, the thrill of stepping outside the script Tywin had written for him, forging a new path on his own terms. In the following days, Tyrion's restlessness grew more pronounced. He spoke with Illyrio, gleaning more details about the situation in Slavers Bay. The Magister hinted that if Daenerys solidified her rule, she might indeed look westward. He also mentioned she was rumored to be beautiful, commanding, touched by magic. Tyrion took that with a pinch of salt, suspecting rumor and myth-making were swirling around her. Still, a Targaryen who had hatched living dragons, there could be no greater symbol of change. Shae noticed his mood, of course. One evening, as they lounged in a private courtyard, she cupped his chin. Your eyes keep drifting off like you're somewhere else. Tell me what you're thinking. He sighed, tracing a finger over the back of her hand. Varys wants me to consider traveling east to meet this Daenerys Targaryen. He believes she might be the realm's best hope. She pursed her lips. Does that matter to us? The realm never did anything for you, Tyrion. Why not leave it behind? Let them tear each other to pieces. Tyrion inhaled, weighing his words. You're not wrong. But I can't help feeling like, if there's a chance to stand against the poison my family has spread, perhaps I should take it. I always tried to do right by the people in my own way. And now, with father gone, Cersei might run the kingdom into ruin. I cannot simply ignore that. He gave a self-deprecating laugh. Call it my foolish sense of duty, or my pride, or a yearning to prove I can shape events rather than be shaped by them. Her eyes searched his face. So you'd go to Slaver's Bay, maybe get yourself killed in some foreign war? He looked away, the lamplight catching the gold flecks in his irises. I don't plan to die. But life is risk, Shae. If Daenerys fails, the old wheel keeps turning, crushing everyone in its path. If she succeeds, maybe there's a place for people like us, a place in a new world. For a long while, she was silent, her face unreadable. Finally, she spoke, voice hushed. I don't want to lose you. You're all I have. But I don't want to hold you back, either. If you feel you must go, I'll follow you. But I'm scared, Tyrion. Meereen? Dragons? I don't understand any of it. I just want to be safe. He touched her cheek gently. I'd not force you to come if you feel safer here. Illyrio would keep you. We could even arrange for you to travel elsewhere while She shook her head adamantly. No. I've seen what happens when we separate. I won't do it again. Tears brightened her eyes, but she blinked them away fiercely. Wherever you go, I go. Tyrion kissed her brow, a surge of gratitude warming him. Then we'll do this together. Thus it was decided, though Tyrion's certainty remained tempered by a healthy dose of caution. He arranged a discreet meeting with Illyrio and Varys in one of the manse's side chambers, lined with tapestries depicting old Valyrian conquests. There, he announced his intent. He would travel to Meereen, see this Daenerys Targaryen for himself, and decide if her cause was worth supporting. Shae would accompany him. In return, Illyrio would supply a suitable escort, a small ship or overland route, along with introductions that might ease his way into the Targaryen court. Varys would continue to feed him information, though the spider himself might not travel alongside Tyrion. The arrangement felt tenuous, but it was the best Tyrion could manage. Illyrio positively beamed, as if the success of some hidden plan had been confirmed. I shall see to all the details. A river galley can carry you to the disputed lands, then another route to Meereen. It is safer, albeit longer, than sailing the open sea past Valyria's ruins. And you'll have guards, men in my employ, who understand the local tongues. So the next chapter of Tyrion's life began to take shape. He bade farewell to the comfort of Illyrio's manse, though the Magister insisted Tyrion and Shae take fine garments and coin for the journey. Varys offered only a final handshake, murmuring, "Look after yourself, my lord. Dragons can be unpredictable." Tyrion snorted. "So can dwarfs, in my experience." He paused. "Will you be close behind us, or do you have other webs to weave?" A mysterious smile tugged at Varys's lips. "I have matters to attend to in Westeros, I'm afraid, for the good of the realm. But perhaps I shall see you again if the fates allow." Tyrion didn't press for details. He knew Varys well enough to sense that the man was playing a dangerous double or triple game, carefully balancing each piece in his tapestry of secrets. Tyrion suspected that if Daenerys proved worthy, Varys would shift his allegiance fully to her cause, but if she faltered, the spider would vanish like a phantom. For Tyrion's part, he'd made his choice. Perhaps it was a fool's errand, but anything felt preferable to living the rest of his days cowering in a corner of Pentos waiting for Cersei's assassins. On a warm dawn, Tyrion and Shae departed the manse by litter, accompanied by a small retinue of Illyrio's men. They carried them down to Pentos's docks, where a shallow draft galley awaited, the water reflecting the pastel colors of the sky. Tyrion wore a loose linen shirt and trousers tailored to his stature, a fine cloak pinned at his shoulder with a brooch shaped like a dragon's head, a whimsical gift from Illyrio. Shae wore a cream-colored gown, her hair braided. She looked composed, but Tyrion felt her tremor when he squeezed her hand. The galley was sleek, with a long deck for rowers and a raised aft cabin. The captain, a wiry Pentoshi with a scraggly beard, bowed to them. "We'll head inland by the river route, my lord, passing through the flatlands. Eventually, we'll come to Volantis, then cross to Slaver's Bay by land or by smaller vessels as the situation demands. The journey will take some weeks, maybe more, but we shall do our best to keep you safe from bandits and other perils." Tyrion nodded, steeling himself for more travel. "Then let's be off. The sooner we arrive, the sooner we can see what awaits." They embarked under the rising sun, oars churning the water, the city of Pentos shrinking behind them. Shae stood beside Tyrion at the railing, silent. He wondered if she was overwhelmed by all the changes, if she regretted not choosing to remain behind. But when he gently touched her shoulder, she turned to him with a determined smile. He smiled back, though his stomach churned with anticipation. In truth, he had no idea what to expect from Daenerys Targaryen or the city of Meereen, except that it would be a crucible in which his fate would be tested again. Their voyage upriver led them through lush farmland and rolling plains, dotted with villages that clung to the water's edge. At each stop for provisions or rest, Illyrio's guards proved their worth, warding off potential thieves and negotiating fair prices. Tyrion, ever curious, asked questions of the locals, gleaning bits of gossip about caravans heading east, mercenary companies patrolling the roads, and rumors of the queen with dragons. Most spoke of her in hushed tones, awed or fearful. To small folk, a dragon queen was the stuff of legends, half myth and half nightmare. Tyrion's skepticism warred with a growing sense of awe. He had never seen a dragon in the flesh, nor had anyone in living memory before Daenerys brought them forth. He wondered if he should be afraid or if his cynicism would hold firm. Shae found distractions to pass the time. She sang local ballads learned from the galley sailors, though Tyrion noticed her songs carried a wistful undertone. At night, they shared a cramped cabin, sleeping on rough blankets. Sometimes the rhythms of the water lulled Tyrion into a peaceful slumber. Other times he lay awake, mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. The further they traveled from Pentos, the more he felt the old Tyrion Lannister receding, replaced by a man unmoored. Perhaps that was good. Perhaps that was terrifying. They reached the outskirts of Volantis after many days, the wide river merging into a delta of canals and swamps. The city loomed ahead, ancient and imposing, its famous long bridge spanning the water in a tangle of arches and dwellings. Volantis was older than King's Landing, older than Pentos, one of the daughter cities of Valyria, still clinging to vestiges of its past glory. Tyrion observed it from the galley's deck, intrigued by the tiger mosaics, the proud black walls, the throngs of slaves bearing tattoos on their faces. The city reeked of wealth and cruelty, a constant swirl of hustle and submission. Shae stayed close to his side, unnerved by the sight of slaves in iron collars. Tyrion's gut tightened at the thought that such a fate could easily have befallen her had Tywin's trial concluded differently. They docked at a wharf near the city gates where a swirling crowd of traders, slaves, and soldiers jostled for space. The captain and Illyrio's men guided Tyrion and Shae into the streets, warning them not to be separated in the press. The air was a stew of heat, spice, sweat, and rotting fish. Market stalls lined the avenues, selling eels, grilled locusts, dyed cloth, and trinkets shaped like tigers or dragons. Tyrion listened to the swirl of Volantene Valyrian, trying to piece together words. Occasionally, he heard mention of the war in Slavers Bay, the unstoppable, unsullied, the fiery gaze of a silver-haired queen. Shae clung to his arm, staring wide-eyed at the crush of humanity. They lodged that night in a cramped inn near the city's eastern gate, guards posted outside their door. Tyrion restlessly prowled the small room, listening to distant drums and flutes from some festival in the city center. He had heard that Volantis was a place of fervent worship for Lawler, the Lord of Light, and that red-robed priests sometimes roused the masses with fiery sermons. A city of shadows and embers, old and proud. Tyrion wished he could explore freely, but caution kept him behind closed doors. He was a fugitive with a price on his head, after all, and the city held sells words from every corner of the world. The next morning, their party left Volantis behind, traveling by wagon along the coastal roads that led east toward Slavers Bay. The roads were dusty, flanked by tall grasses and patches of twisted forest. Villages were sparser here, overshadowed by distant mountains and the threat of Dothraki raids. Sometimes they passed caravans guarded by mercenary companies, bright banners, storm crows, company of the cat, and Tyrion would eye them warily. Mercenaries went where the gold was, and Cersei's gold might tempt them if they recognized him. So far, no one had seemed to notice a dwarf traveling in fine clothing, but Tyrion could not rely on luck forever. Days stretched into weeks. The heat grew oppressive, making the roads shimmer at midday. Tyrion was forced to ration the water in their wagon's barrels more carefully. Shae wilted in the sun, her cheeks flushed. She tried to keep her spirits up, joking with Tyrion or humming tunes, but he saw her exhaustion. He wished he could shelter her in a cool palace, but they had a destination that beckoned, one that might not be so cool itself. Meereen lay in a land of harsh deserts, great city-states built on the backs of slaves and cruelty. Daenerys had appended that system or tried to. The question was whether she still clung to power or if her rebellion had collapsed. One evening, they camped in the lee of a rocky hill, the sky streaked with orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. The guards pitched tents, built a small fire. Tyrion sat on a flat stone, watching the last light fade, massaging his aching legs. Shae joined him, offering a water skin. He took a small sip, grateful. Around them, the guards quietly conversed, stirring a pot of stew. Tyrion reflected that he owed Illyrio a debt for the men's loyalty. So far, none had made trouble, even if they occasionally threw curious glances at the dwarf who commanded such courtesy. While they rested, a faint sound drifted from the east, a howl, or perhaps a distant horn. The The guards stiffened. One rose, peering into the gloom. Could be the wind, he said uncertainly, or Dothraki. Tyrion felt a clutch of apprehension. They had not encountered any Khalasar so far, but it was not unheard of for Dothraki raiders to range this far. He reached for the small dagger at his belt, though he knew how little use it would be against a mounted horde. Shae's eyes flickered with fear. For a tense hour, they waited, ears straining for more sounds. Nothing came, no hoofbeats thundered on the horizon. Eventually, the guards relaxed. Tyrion suspected that if a Khalasar had been near, they'd have fallen upon the caravan with the swiftness of desert hawks. He breathed out, letting the tension ease from his shoulders. But that night, lying with Shae in the cramped tent, he couldn't stop imagining the nightmares of Dothraki raids, of how fragile they were out here on the wide plains. They were small pieces in a grand game, vulnerable to forces they scarcely understood. At last, they reached the outskirts of Slaver's Bay, where wide salt flats gave way to farmland forcibly repurposed by Daenerys's armies, or so the rumors said. Refugees clogged the roads, entire families fleeing the chaos of the newly free cities where the old masters fought to reclaim power. Tyrion's party had to pick their way carefully through the throngs. He saw the haunted eyes of people who had been liberated from chains only to face famine and violence. It was a grim sight, fueling the doubts gnawing at him. Was Daenerys truly a savior? Or had she unleashed anarchy without a plan? They learned that Meereen was closed to outsiders unless they had business with the Queen. The Sons of the Harpy waged a campaign of terror in the streets at night, while the Queen's Unsullied patrolled with silent vigilance. Tyrion's guards hissed that approaching the gates unannounced could be suicidal. But Tyrion insisted they must try, for their only hope of forging an audience was to present themselves openly. The name Illyrio Mopatis carried weight, and with it letters of introduction. If the Queen had any inclination to trust the man who had once arranged her marriage, it might gain Tyrion entry. So they approached Meereen's massive gates at midday, the sun scorching overhead. The city's high walls loomed, adorned with the harpy sigil of old Giscari design, though presumably much had changed inside. Tyrion's group halted at a checkpoint manned by unsullied, stoic, helmeted warriors with spears at the ready. One stepped forward, face obscured by the fitted helm, voice emotionless. "State your purpose." Tyrion dismounted from the wagon, stepping carefully so as not to appear threatening. He wiped sweat from his brow. "I bear a letter from Magister Illyrio Mopatis, addressed to Her Magnificence Daenerys Stormborn, the Mother of Dragons. I request an audience." The unsullied soldier glanced at the parchment Tyrion offered. He did not unseal it, but nodded curtly. "Remain here. I will summon an officer." They stood in tense anticipation as the soldier vanished through a side postern. Shae clung to Tyrion's arm, eyes darting nervously across the high walls. Their retinue huddled together, hands close to their weapons but not brandishing them. At length, the soldier returned with a taller, leaner man clad in partial armor, curly hair showing beneath the helm. His voice was more animated. "I am Dario Naharis, commander of the Queen's Sellsword Company. You wish to see the Queen." Tyrion recognized the name, a notorious Sellsword who had once led the Second Sons. He offered a polite bow. "I do indeed, sir." Or, "Commander, will she receive me?" Dario studied Tyrion with overt curiosity, noting the dwarf's stature, the distinct features that marked him as a Lannister. He skimmed the letter seal, shrugged. "Come inside, but leave your weapons with the Unsullied. We will see if the Queen is in a receptive mood." His gaze flicked to Shae. "Your companion as well." Reluctantly, Tyrion nodded, handing over his dagger. The guards gave up their swords. Shae surrendered a small knife she carried for protection. Then they followed Dario through the gates into Meereen. The city's interior assaulted their senses, a riot of color, dust, half-finished repairs, and tense faces. Graffiti stained the walls, praising or cursing the Queen. Unsullied patrols marched in stoic ranks, while robed priests preached about freedom in the name of the Mother of Dragons. Tyrion glimpsed boarded-up fighting pits, a memory of the city's brutal past. The tension was palpable, as though one spark could ignite an uprising. Dario led them through winding streets toward a grand pyramid at the city's heart. Once a symbol of Giscari opulence, it now served as Daenerys' seat of power. Tyrion could almost feel the weight of ancient history pressing in. Empires had risen and fallen here, and now a new queen claimed dominion. If she was half as remarkable as the rumors said, Tyrion might have found the right place after all. At the pyramid's base, they were escorted into a wide entrance chamber ringed by braziers. Dario handed the letter to a scribe, who nodded and disappeared into the depths of the structure. "Wait here," Dario commanded, leaning against a pillar. Tyrion and Shae exchanged a glance. Their escort shuffled anxiously, the oppressive heat making them sweat beneath their traveling clothes. Minutes crawled by. Finally, the scribe returned, speaking hurriedly to Dario. The Sellsword grinned, flashing white teeth beneath his neatly trimmed mustache. He waved Tyrion forward. "The queen will see you. This way." Climbing a series of ramps into the pyramid's upper levels was a sweaty endeavor. At last, they emerged into a spacious hall lined with towering columns carved in the shape of harpies. At the far end stood a dais draped with rich fabrics. On that dais was a high seat, and upon that seat, Daenerys Targaryen herself. She wore a gown of pale blue silk, her silver blonde hair braided into an intricate design, her posture regal yet tempered by youth. The Unsullied flanked her, and to her left stood a lean man with red-brown skin and a severe face, Grey Worm, Tyrion guessed. To her right was a tall knight with a lined face and white hair, Ser Barristan Selmy, the famed Kingsguard turned traitor or hero, depending on whom one asked. Tyrion recognized him from King's Landing, though the man might not recognize Tyrion in this context. They strode closer. Tyrion felt his heart thudding as he studied Daenerys. She was younger than he'd anticipated, but a resolute intelligence shone in her violet eyes. She gazed at him without fear or revulsion, which was a refreshing change from the way most had looked upon him his entire life. And behind her throne, through a tall archway, Tyrion glimpsed the silhouette of something large moving, one of her dragons, perhaps caged or held at bay. A thrill coursed through him at the reality of it. Dario announced their names. Tyrion suppressed the instinct to offer a flippant bow, opting instead for a measured dip of his head, though the chain of his lineage and the gravity of the moment weighed heavily upon him. Shae stood at his side, eyes lowered. Daenerys' voice cut through the hush, clear and cool. "You are Tyrion Lannister, so the letter says, though it also names you a traitor to your house. Why do you come to me?" Tyrion swallowed, meeting her gaze. He had rehearsed this, but the living presence of the queen made his mouth go dry. "I come as a fugitive from Westeros, your grace, and as one who has reason to despise the current regime. I seek the mother of dragons who has freed thousands from bondage, who might bring a new order to the Seven Kingdoms." Her expression flickered, an almost imperceptible nod to Ser Barristan. The old knight's brow furrowed in recognition. He was once master of coin under King Joffrey, Ser Barristan said quietly. A Lannister of Casterly Rock, known for his cunning tongue. Tyrion managed a wry smile. "Guilty as charged." Daenerys' gaze narrowed. "Then why come now? Did you not serve the Lannister throne?" He exhaled, forcing himself to speak candidly. "I did, but I was cast aside, accused of regicide. My father planned my execution. So I removed him from the board, if you will. Poison, yes. A father who valued his legacy more than justice. And now I'm in exile with no love for those who rule King's Landing." The queen's lips parted slightly, as if in surprise. "You admit to kinslaying?" Tyrion felt Shae's hand tighten at his sleeve. He lifted his chin. "It is not a thing I boast of, your grace. But I would not lie to you. My father was monstrous in his own right. He threatened the woman I love, threatened me, orchestrated travesties that left the realm in disarray. So I ended him and I fled." He gestured to Shae. "She is the woman he threatened. We both stand before you, seeking a chance to serve a better ruler than those we left behind." Silence weighed on the hall. Tyrion wondered if he had said too much too openly. Daenerys studied him, her eyes flicking to Shae, then back to Tyrion. "Barristan," she said quietly. The knight nodded once. "He speaks truly of his cunning. I cannot say if his heart is genuine, but I know the father he speaks of, Tywin Lannister, was indeed a fearsome man. A man who executed or tormented many. Perhaps the dwarf had cause." He kept his voice neutral, though Tyrion sensed a hint of sympathy behind the old knight's calm demeanor. Daenerys settled back in her seat, letting a small hush lapse. Then she spoke, each word poised. "I am Daenerys Storeborn of House Targaryen, breaker of chains, mother of dragons. I have freed slaves and toppled tyrants, but my hold on this city is tenuous. Enemies lurk within every shadow. Why should I trust a Lannister, even one who killed his own father?" Tyrion considered his reply carefully. "Because, your grace, you need men who understand how to rule a realm as complicated as this one and the one across the sea. I served as Hand of the King, albeit briefly, and I learned some truths about power. I learned how to quell riots, how to balance rival factions, how to keep a city from devouring itself. Though it cost me dearly, I have a skill for governance. And I have no illusions that returning to King's Landing in any other capacity is possible. But if you are indeed the future of Westeros, then I'd rather stand with you than watch from exile as the realm burns." Her eyes sparked. "You speak of standing with me, but you come with only a handful of men and your own name is tarnished. What can you offer that I do not already have?" Tyrion extended his empty hands. Wisdom. Perspective. The ear of some who might yet be swayed. My sister's tyranny will drive many to your cause if they see a viable alternative. I can be a bridge, if you will, between your new world and the old families of Westeros. He hesitated, then added, and, Your Grace, I know something of dragons from the histories. My father had an extensive library, and I studied them. You have 3, I'm told. Perhaps I can offer insight into their rearing, gleaned from the records of old Targaryen lore. He wasn't sure if that last claim was overstated. He'd read plenty about dragons, yes, but practical rearing advice was sparse. Still, it might pique her interest. Sure enough, Daenerys's gaze kindled at the mention of dragons. She studied Tyrion anew, as if weighing the sincerity in his eyes. At last, she inclined her head slightly. I shall allow you and your companion to remain in Meereen under my protection for now. You will be watched, of course. If you prove yourself, perhaps I will name you an advisor. But cross me, Lannister, and you will learn the meaning of Dracarys. Tyrion bowed his head, relief mingled with trepidation. I understand. Thank you, Your Grace. Daario smirked from the side, crossing his arms over his chest. Ser Barristan nodded, though his expression remained cautious. Grey Worm was impassive, spear in hand. Tyrion glanced at Shae, who let out a breath, her shoulders dropping in visible relief. So began Tyrion's life under the banner of the Dragon Queen. They were given modest quarters within the pyramid, a Spartan chamber with a view of the city's rooftops. Each day, Tyrion observed how Daenerys attempted to govern a city torn between newly freed citizens and resentful former masters. The Sons of the Harpy struck from the shadows, murdering patrols of unsullied or freedmen. Daenerys's advisors were stretched thin. Ser Barristan offered knightly counsel from the Westerosi tradition. Daario pressed for swifter, more ruthless action, and Grey Worm advocated for the safety of his unsullied above all else. Tyrion inserted himself cautiously, offering small suggestions about how to calm the populace or set up a system of local governance that might satisfy the moderate factions. Sometimes Daenerys listened. Other times, she seemed frustrated by the complexities of rule, as though the raw force of dragons should be enough to solve everything. But Tyrion glimpsed a determination in her, an empathy for the downtrodden that set her apart from the rulers he had known in King's Landing. At night, he would return to Shae, who spent her days mostly in their chamber or in the courtyard gardens, cautious of a city that eyed foreigners with suspicion. She told him she felt restless, uncertain of her place. He tried to reassure her that once Daenerys decided to sail west, they could shape a better future for themselves. But he felt the strain as well. Meereen was a crucible, and the Queen was tested daily by rebellion within and looming threats without. Tyrion thought of the war he had once navigated in King's Landing, the precarious alliances and betrayals. Here, it was no different, only the culture and the players had changed. One evening, Daenerys summoned Tyrion to a private audience in her solar, a chamber that overlooked a terrace. The Queen stood at the terrace's edge, gazing out at the city's rooftops tinged by moonlight. Tyrion approached quietly. She turned, her expression conflicted. A new threat arises. The Yunkai have mustered an army with Sellsword companies. They march on Meereen, determined to reclaim the city for slavery. My people are afraid. Some urge me to use the dragons against them, to burn their army in the field. Tyrion inclined his head. And what do you think, Your Grace? She sighed, crossing her arms. I do not wish to be Queen of Ashes. But if I do nothing, the city may fall, and all those who believed in my promise of freedom will be enslaved again. I have tried negotiation. They demand we restore the practice of slavery. That is impossible. Tyrion's mind spun, recalling the strategies he'd studied in King's Landing. If you meet them in open battle, you risk everything on the field. Dragons are formidable, yes, but they can be wounded. And your Unsullied are brave, but they are outnumbered. Perhaps you can harass them, cut their supply lines, make them bleed until they are too weak to assault the city. War is never clean, but a siege here could be to your advantage if you keep them from uniting outside the walls. Daenerys nodded slowly. Daario says the same, but more brashly. Barristan cautions me that the city's walls can be both a shield and a cage. I want to protect my people, not starve them in a prolonged siege. Tyrion noticed the flicker of exhaustion in her eyes. He stepped closer, voice gentle. Ruling is not easy, Your Grace. Sometimes you must choose the least terrible option. If you cannot yield on slavery, nor should you, then war is inevitable. At least wage it in a manner that spares the city if possible. Negotiate for time, sow discord among their Sellsword companies, bribe them if you must. Divide your enemies. That is how you win without burning everything in your path. She gazed at him with something like gratitude. You think like a politician and a general. It is refreshing. Most of my advisors either thirst for glory or cling to tradition. He managed a small smile. I have had enough experience with both. They rarely serve the common folk. You do, and that is why you must endure. Daenerys turned back to the moonlit city. I will try your suggestions, Tyrion Lannister. Time will tell if they bear fruit. For now, thank you. He bowed slightly, heart thudding with a mixture of pride and caution. Each day, he grew more certain that Daenerys Targaryen could be a different kind of ruler, fierce, compassionate, but unyielding when it came to her ideals. He only hoped the harsh reality of the world would not twist her into something else, as it had done to so many. Time would tell. For his part, Tyrion had committed himself to her cause, to a vision of a realm without the black hand of House Lannister crushing it. Perhaps he and Shae would find a better future under the banner of the dragon. Or perhaps they would perish in the fires of another war. Still, with every passing day, he felt a faint, defiant hope that made his heart lighter than it had been in years. He left Daenerys' solar and descended the pyramid's corridors, his footsteps echoing off the stone. Shae awaited him in their chamber, face anxious in the lantern's glow. He approached and took her hands. She's preparing for war, he whispered, the magnitude of it sinking in. We're at the center of it now. Shae swallowed, eyes flickering with worry, but she squeezed his hands back. Then we'll weather it together. Tyrion nodded, pulling her into an embrace. From the open window, he thought he heard the distant roar of a dragon echoing across the city, a beast unfettered, a symbol of power incarnate. He shivered, remembering how easily such force could unleash devastation. But he also thought of the endless cycle of pain in Westeros, a cycle he had tried and failed to break under Lannister rule. Perhaps a dragon queen, guided by some measure of counsel and reason, might do better. Perhaps. So he held Shae close, letting himself believe that for once in his life, he had chosen a path that might save rather than condemn him. The memory of Tywin's last rasping breath lingered like a shadow, but the light of a new possibility glimmered before him, and he stepped toward it, determined to see how this new chapter would unfold.